We begin the newscast with our top focus on China, as President Xi Jinping is often described as the most powerful Chinese president since Mao Zedong. But his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic has dented his popularity on the global stage. In a desperate attempt to restore credibility, Xi Jinping is employing the state propaganda machine to portray him as the president of the people. The Chinese state media has tailored together 10 moments from Xi Jinping's inspection visits in the wake of the COVID-19 outbreak. The idea is to portray Xi as a mass leader who puts his people first. China's ambition of becoming a superpower is tied to Xi Jinping's own personal goals. And Xi's ability to project strength on the global stage requires him to have absolute control within China. A running theme in all of President Xi's inspection visits is the focus on people. He has been instructing his officials to implement policies that benefit the workers in all sectors, including agriculture and tourism. This people-centric approach has been a cornerstone of Xi Jinping's administrative philosophy since he took charge. President Xi is facing career-defining challenges in the form of protests in Hong Kong and international criticism over delay in publishing details of the COVID-19 outbreak. This new PR exercise aims to tighten President Xi Jinping's grip over the country at a time when he is at odds with the Western world. For more details, let's quickly go across to our correspondent Richard Kimber, who's joining me live at this hour from Hong Kong. A very good afternoon to you, Richard. Now, ever since the time of Mao Zedong, propaganda is not new to the Chinese Communist Party. But what is China hoping to seek now through mass propaganda that projects Xi and the state as a protector and the benefactor?
Well, as you say, President Xi has embarked on this mission to try and, in a way, kind of remind the Chinese people that he is representing them on a global scale. It's very easy to imagine, because China is now involved so often in geopolitical battles of various kinds on a global stage, that many domestic ambitions and challenges that the Communist Party face there often don't get discussed in the international media. One of those that's a huge challenge for the Communist Party is the eradication of poverty within China, and that's one of the missions in the most recent 5-year plan from the Communist Party, and that's one of the messages that President Xi and his team have been trying to purvey to the Chinese people, that despite the coronavirus, China stands in a very good position, so they say, to recover quickly, better than many countries around the world. And that, together with a calling to the Chinese people to remember that they are one nation, that everybody, irrespective of any ethnic minority status, and that's, of course, another criticism that's been levelled at China in recent years from the US, anybody in China is Chinese and is part of this vision that the Communist Party under Xi's leadership is taking them towards a much brighter future after 2021. Of course, that's a big challenge, and as Premier Li Keqiang outlined in his most recent statement during these Communist Party meetings, there's still some hundreds of millions of people in China who, by many global standards, are basically still living in poverty. So it's a huge mission to accomplish, but by actually reaching out and making these types of visits, President Xi, who's so rarely now seen in these types of more local areas, was actually then able to portray himself still as a man of the people, much in the way that, as you say, Mao Zedong might have done well before President Xi's time in power.
Right. Richard, it also comes across as a PR exercise meant to salvage Xi Jinping's dented image. Now, be it the Great Firewall, China's infiltration of foreign media circles, or even banning words on social media websites, what are the tools used by China at the moment to control the narrative and muffle dissent?
Well, certainly the state media is increasingly being used to portray a very specific message that's very much the mouthpiece of the Communist Party, and we're now seeing leading figures from Chinese media being more outspoken than perhaps they ever were before, and actually much more recognisable on the international stage, largely thanks to their involvement on platforms such as Twitter and internationally used social media platforms. Previously, we may never have known who these figures were, but they're actually becoming quite outspoken now. So too many of the Chinese officials who represent China on the global stage, the ambassadors to the likes of the UK and the US, who perhaps weren't such well-known figures and faces on international television. They're now becoming very prominent, especially with regards to discussions of what's happening here in Hong Kong. Thirdly, there's still a concerted effort on the part of the Communist Party to crack down on people using platforms within China, such as Weibo, and prevent the dissemination of information that they do not want spread throughout China. So there are ongoing cases reported in media here in Hong Kong of people who are labelled as dissidents in China, but somewhat celebrated by pro-democracy groups here in Hong Kong, who are finding that they're not able to spread the messages they want to in China at all.
Right. It's interesting, Richard, that you mentioned Hong Kong, because large pro-democracy crowds are going to be gathering near the government headquarters today in Hong Kong, calling for the government to withdraw its controversial extradition bill of last year. Also, do throw light on the current status of the tensions over the security law.
That's right. These protests are certainly ongoing. There's no suggestion really that they will stop, irrespective of any restrictions that still exist in place here because of the coronavirus. What's happening this evening is that there's a memorial event really for the anniversary of the death of a young protester who last year was actually climbing onto a scaffold to hang a banner to show his frustration with the extradition bill that the government was passing there. Last year, eventually, the Hong Kong government withdrew that bill, but now, of course, Hong Kong faces really what, for many pro-democracy advocates, is a much scarier prospect. This is this national security bill that's being imposed from China. And despite the many, many efforts from the government to reassure people here that this national security bill is necessary and legally sound, and it is for the prosperity of Hong Kong, there is a growing sense here that Hong Kong is being taken over in some ways politically by China now, more quickly and aggressively than people were expecting. And so that's why when anniversaries come around like this one today, there's really a huge sense of obligation on the part of the pro-democracy advocates to make sure that they continue to make their voice heard. And that's why there's likely to be a fairly large gathering this evening.
Right, we'll leave it at that and perhaps come back to you for more developments as in they take place. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us.